The house had been empty for years longer than I could even remember. It stood at the end of the block like a forgotten relic, its windows dark and lifeless, as if the house itself had given up on being noticed. Every day on my way to school, I'd walk past it. I always felt a strange pull toward it, like the house was quietly calling me, daring me to uncover its secrets. Its porch sagged, the wood rotting with each passing season, and the chimney had crumbled to the point where it looked like one good storm might knock it over completely. But what always caught my eye were the two upstairs windows. They looked like a pair of sad, hollow eyes, staring out at the world, watching but never seeing. It was a lonely place, and I often wondered why no one seemed to want it. The kids at school had their theories. There were always rumors. "The house is haunted," they'd whisper. "The spirits of the Monroe family still live there. They say if you listen closely, you can hear them crying at night." I brushed those stories off, of course. Ghosts weren't real. They were just made-up stories to scare little kids, right? But still, it was strange. The house had been on the market for as long as I could remember, yet no one ever bought it. Some families moved in, but none of them stayed for more than a few months. After a while, it became just another thing to gossip about, something no one took seriously. One afternoon, something changed. The for sale sign that had been half buried in the overgrown lawn for years was gone. I noticed it right away, that strange gap in the yard. For a moment, I felt a flicker of excitement. Maybe someone had finally bought it. Maybe a new family was going to move in. A family with kids my age. Maybe the house would come to life again, full of laughter and noise instead of silence. But that hope quickly faded when I got home. As I walked through the front door, I heard my parents talking in the kitchen. "Did you hear about the old house on Maple Street?" my dad was saying. "Looks like the town council finally decided what to do with it." "Oh," my mom replied, sounding uninterested as she chopped vegetables for dinner. "They're going to tear it down." I froze at the bottom of the stairs, listening. Tear it down? Why? The house was old, sure, and run down, but it wasn't beyond saving, was it? With a little work, it could be livable again. "It's for the best," my mom said. "That place is an eyesore, and with its reputation, I can't imagine anyone would want to live there." "Yeah," my dad agreed. "And with all the rumors about it being haunted, it's better for the town if it's gone." Haunted. There it was again, that word. I frowned as I made my way upstairs to my room. What did they mean by the house a reputation? Were they talking about the stories the kids at school told? The ones about the Monroe family? Once I got to my room, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was something I didn't know, something the adults weren't telling us. I dropped my backpack on the floor and sat down at my desk, my fingers hovering over the keyboard of my laptop. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I needed to find out more. So, I typed the address of the house into the search bar. What I found made my stomach turn. The first link was to an old newspaper article. The headline read, "Tragedy strikes Monroe family in quiet town." I clicked on it, feeling a sense of dread wash over me as I began to read. The Monroes had lived in the house during the 1940s. Bernice Monroe, the mother, James Monroe, the father, and their two daughters, Lisa and Valerie. They were a normal family, well liked by their neighbors. They had no enemies, no reason for anyone to want to harm them. But one night, someone had broken into their home and attacked them all. The article described the scene in shocking detail. The family had been found in the dining room, sitting around the table as if they were about to have dinner. But their bodies were covered in injuries, and their eyes had been removed. The most horrifying part, the police found that their hearts had been taken. and the missing hearts were discovered on the plates in front of them, arranged like some grotesque display. I could feel my skin crawl as I read on. The police had no leads, no clues. The only thing they found was a silver charm bracelet near the trash can in the kitchen. It had the name Nancy engraved on it, but no one knew who Nancy was. The Monroes didn't know anyone by that name, and the police were never able to track down its owner. The article ended with a chilling note. The person responsible was never caught. I leaned back in my chair, my heart racing. This was so much worse than I'd ever imagined. The stories at school didn't even come close to capturing how horrifying the truth was. But there was something that didn't add up. Why had the Monroes been targeted? Why them, out of all the families in town? And why hadn't the criminal ever been found? I spent hours digging through old articles, trying to find answers. But there wasn't much else. After the incident, the house was put on the market, but no one stayed for long. Families would move in, only to leave after a few weeks, claiming strange things happened inside the house. Some said they heard footsteps in the middle of the nightlight, quick footsteps like those of children running through the halls. Others reported hearing a faint heartbeat, slow and steady at first, but growing louder and faster until it stopped abruptly, as if it had been silenced. I shut my laptop and turned to look out the window. In the distance, I could see the outline of the old house, the chimney just visible against the fading light of the evening. A sense of unease settled over me. There had to be something more to this, something hidden inside the house. I don't know why, but I had this strange feeling that the answers were still there, waiting to be found. That night, after my parents had gone to bed, I made a decision. I had to see the house for myself. I don't know what I was expecting to find, maybe a clue the police had missed, or some sign that would explain everything. But I had to go. I slipped out of my room and tiptoed down the stairs, careful not to make any noise. The front door creaked as I opened it, and for a moment I froze, listening to make sure my parents hadn't heard. When I was sure the coast was clear, I stepped outside and into the cool night air. The walk to the old house felt longer than usual. The moonlight cast long shadows on the empty street, and every little sound made me jump. By the time I reached the house, my heart was pounding in my chest. In the darkness, the house looked even more sinister. The windows seemed to watch me as I approached, like they were waiting for me to make a move. I tried the front door, but it was locked. Same with the back. Just when I was about to give up, I noticed one of the basement windows was broken. I crouched down, peering into the darkness beyond. My pulse quickened, but I couldn't back out now. I slid through the window, landing in the basement with a soft thud. The air inside was thick and musty, and the darkness pressed in around me. I fumbled for my flashlight, flicking it on as I slowly swept the beam around the room. My heart nearly stopped when the light caught on a figure in the corner, but I quickly realized it was just an old dressmaker's dummy. I let out a shaky laugh, trying to calm my nerves. But as I moved deeper into the basement, that uneasy feeling only grew stronger. Something wasn't right. I could feel it. I didn't know what I would find here, but one thing was certain: I wasn't alone. It was just a house, I told myself over and over again. Ghosts aren't real, right? They're just stories people tell to scare each other. Still, as I stood there on the porch, staring at the front door, my skin prickled with unease. My mind refused to let go of all the things I'd read online about this place. Tales of strange noises, shadows moving on their own, and even disappearances. Were any of those stories true? No, that's ridiculous, I scolded myself. Those people probably made it all up, maybe just an excuse to get out of paying the rent or avoid dealing with an old, creaky house. I took a deep breath, trying to push my fears away. There was nothing here but an abandoned house, a few broken windows, and rotting wood. I was letting my imagination get the better of me. Determined to prove that there was nothing to be scared of, I opened the front door and stepped inside. The smell of mildew hit me instantly, thick and heavy in the air. The wood beneath my feet groaned with every step, and the wind outside howled through the cracks in the walls. I shivered, though it wasn't just from the cold. I climbed the stairs cautiously, each plank creaking louder as I ascended to the second floor. The whole place seemed to sigh around me, like it was alive, like it was watching me. Ridiculous, I thought. I was just letting the stories get in my head. The upstairs hallway was narrow and dimly lit by the pale light of the moon slipping through the broken windows. I slipped into the first room I came across, my footsteps echoing off the dusty wooden floor. The air was thick with neglect dust, cobwebs, and the weight of abandonment hung in the space. It was the kind of place where time seemed to stand still. I stepped further in, scanning the room carefully. My breath echoed in my ears, too loud for the silence around me. The sound of my footsteps on the hardwood floor felt almost intrusive, like I wasn't supposed to be here, like I was disturbing something. But what? There was no one here. There hadn't been for years. I peered into each room as I passed. First, the living room empty, except for a few broken pieces of furniture. Then the dining room dusty, with chairs knocked over and an old table sitting in the center like some forgotten relic. The kitchen, too, was empty. No dishes in the sink, no signs of life. But then, as I moved further into the kitchen, something caught my eye. A faint glimmer in the moonlight, coming from the counter by the sink. I frowned, feeling a chill creep up my spine. What could possibly be reflecting light in here? Curiosity got the better of me, and I walked over to take a closer look. There, lying on the counter, was a bracelet. Silver, with 5 delicate charms dangling from a braided chain. I picked it up, holding it under the light. The charms spelled out a name, Nancy. Nancy? How could this bracelet be here? Who had left it? My thoughts were cut short by a sound, a faint creak. The kind of sound wood makes when it's being stepped on. My heart pounded in my chest, the blood rushing in my ears. It came again, this time louder, closer. Someone was in the house. I froze, scanning the room, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. The kitchen suddenly felt much smaller, much darker. My pulse quickened. I needed to hide, but there was nowhere to go. My eyes landed on the cabinet under the sink, the only spot big enough to conceal me. Without thinking, I yanked the doors open and squeezed myself inside, pulling the doors shut behind me. The cramped space smelled of damp wood and dust, but I didn't care. I held my breath, straining to hear any movement outside. The footsteps stopped. Silence pressed in on me. Had they left? Maybe they'd heard me and decided to go. Maybe. Then I heard it, a soft, rhythmic clicking. Click, click, like fingernails tapping lightly on wood. It was faint at first, but it was getting closer. My breath caught in my throat. Whatever was making that sound, it was right outside the cabinet. The clicking grew louder, and I realized with growing dread that it wasn't just outside. It was inside the cabinet. Something was in there with me. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it to go away. It had to be a mouse, I thought, or maybe a rat. Heaven only knew what kind of creatures lived in this old house. But then, the sound shifted. It was too slow, too deliberate to be a mouse. The realization sent a fresh wave of terror through me. Suddenly, the clicking stopped. Silence. I let out a shaky breath, thinking maybe whatever it was had left. I opened my eyes, feeling the tension in my chest ease slightly. But that relief vanished when I saw the cabinet doors slowly begin to swing open. Panic seized me. I grabbed the doors, trying to pull them closed again, but they resisted. It was like something was pulling them from the other side. Harder and harder, I pulled, but it wasn't enough. The doors were ripped open with a force that threw me off balance. I tumbled forward, landing hard on the kitchen floor. I looked up and found myself staring into a face. It was pale, almost translucent in the moonlight. Thin, heart-shaped, with long, stringy blonde hair hanging down in dirty clumps. But what sent a jolt of pure horror through me were the eyes, or rather, the absence of them. The eye sockets were empty, black holes where the eyes should have been. Thick, dark blood dripped from the hollows, tracing jagged lines down its cheeks. It smiled at me, a slow, terrible smile, pulling back thin, cracked lips to reveal yellow teeth. For a moment, I was frozen, staring in disbelief. How long I stayed like that, I don't know. Time felt warped, stretched, in the presence of this thing. But the spell was broken by the sound. That clicking again, louder now, and right beside me. I turned my head slowly, and there, under the sink where I had been hiding, was another face. Smaller, but identical to the first. A child's face, pale, eyeless, and grinning at me. It giggled, a high-pitched, sinister sound that sent ice through my veins. It reached out with a bony hand and grabbed my ankle, tugging me back toward the darkness of the cabinet. I kicked out, frantic, desperate to free myself. My foot connected with its hand, and it let go with a shriek. I scrambled to my feet, but before I could run, the larger figure was there, reaching for me with long, bony fingers. I shoved at it, but my hands passed through it like smoke. I stumbled back, hitting the wall, dazed and terrified. Suddenly, a cold hand rested on my shoulder. I screamed, spinning around and swinging wildly, but once again my hand passed through thin air. The figure reappeared in front of me, still smiling, still watching me with those black, empty sockets. I bolted, running for the door. But as I reached it, another figure appeared, blocking my way. This one was smaller, its eyeless face focused on me. I didn't stop. I ran straight through it, the cold air around it sending shivers down my spine as I fled down the hallway. The whole house seemed to come alive around me. I could hear a heartbeat now, not mine, but the house. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, all pulsing in rhythm with the deep, steady thud. The air vibrated with it, making the whole place feel alive, breathing, watching. I reached the basement door and stumbled down the stairs, my flashlight shaking in my hand as I lit the way. The thudding heartbeat grew louder, echoing through the walls, through my body. I could barely hear my own footsteps over the sound. I reached a small window, pulled it open, and scrambled out into the night. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. Weeks later, I stood outside the house again, staring at its empty windows. The workers who had been hired to tear it down had never returned, their trucks speeding away as if something was chasing them. No one had touched the house since. I'd avoided it too until now. The place didn't seem so menacing in the daylight, just sad, like a forgotten memory. Maybe it knew something I didn't. Maybe it was trying to tell me something. Those things I saw, the eyeless figures, they weren't monsters, were they? They had been the spirits of the family murdered here, their restless souls trapped in the house. I started to turn away, but something shiny in the grass caught my eye. I bent down and picked it up. A bracelet, silver and tarnished with age. 5 little letters dangled from it. Nancy. A cold chill ran through me. I slowly looked back at the house, and in the second floor window, I saw them. 4 figures. No eyes,